The partner who changed nothing. We'd lived together for nearly 8 years. In that time, I'd memorized him in ways I didn't realize were possible. Not just his face, his voice, or the shape of his hands, but the tiny details most people would overlook. The way he always stood with his left foot slightly forward when he was relaxed. The small pause before he answered a question. Like he was tasting the words in his head first. The faint upward twitch in his right eyebrow whenever he found something amusing but didn't want to laugh. The rhythm of his breathing when he fell asleep. After that long, you notice changes, but they happen slowly. They're natural, layered on top of what came before. New habits built on old ones. I thought that was how it always worked. That's why this change was so strange. It wasn't that something changed. It was that nothing had changed at all. And yet, something was undeniably different. I came home on a Thursday evening, tired from work, expecting the usual. My bag in its spot by the door, the faint smell of dinner cooking, him moving around the kitchen. All of that was there. The pan sizzling with garlic and oil. The soft hum of the exhaust fan. The same music station he always played in the background. He turned, smiled, and said, "Hey, you're home." Exactly like he always did. Same shirt I'd seen him wear 100 times, same slightly mussed hair, same posture. But that smile, it wasn't wrong, exactly. Just too precise. Like it had been copied from memory and pasted onto his face. I didn't say anything. People have off moments, but over the next few days, I kept noticing other things. The way he stirred his coffee clockwise instead of counterclockwise. The way he set his phone down screen side up, when before he always set it face down. The tiny pause in his laugh, as if checking some internal script before letting it out. And the words, subtle but different. He stopped saying certain phrases I'd heard from him for years, replacing them with others that felt slightly formal, slightly out of place. I told myself it was nothing. People change, routines shift. But these weren't changes that felt grown. They felt swapped. One evening he fell asleep on the couch. I sat across from him, pretending to watch TV, but really just studying him. The angle of his jaw, the way his chest rose and fell. It was all correct, every detail matched. And yet, in the same way, you know the difference. Between a handwritten letter and a photocopy, I knew. The breaking point came on a Sunday morning. He was in the shower and his phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Normally, I'd never look. But something inside me, a cold knot I couldn't untangle, pushed me toward it. The screen was unlocked, open to a notes app. One sentence stared back at me. I have to get used to this life soon. That was it. No title, no other entries, just that line. When he came back, towel slung over his shoulder, I asked casually, "Hey, what's this note about?" He glanced at the phone, then at me, and smiled like I'd caught him writing a grocery list. "Oh, that. Just something about work, new responsibilities. I'm still adjusting." He chuckled, kissed my forehead, and walked away. But that word, used to, wouldn't leave my mind. You don't have to get used to a life you've been living for 8 years. That night, I lay awake listening to him breathe beside me. It was steady, perfectly timed, almost mechanical. I counted the seconds between each inhale. Never varied, not once. The next week, I started watching more closely. He'd always had little imperfections in his routine. Misplacing his keys, forgetting to close the fridge, starting a sentence and trailing off. But now, everything he did was seamless. Every movement efficient. Every reply immediate but never rushed. One evening, I tried an experiment. I mentioned a memory from years ago. A weekend trip where it rained the whole time and we ended up playing cards in the hotel lobby. He smiled and agreed, but his version of the memory didn't include the joke he'd told that made me spill my drink. It was small, but it was the kind of detail he would have remembered. "Are you sure?" I asked. He tilted his head. "Positive." "Why?" "No reason," I said, forcing a smile. 2 days later, I woke up to find him already in the kitchen, making breakfast. I leaned in the doorway, watching. He moved like a dancer running a routine, smooth, deliberate, not a motion wasted. When he noticed me, he smiled. Same smile. The perfect one. "Morning," he said. It felt like a line from a play. That afternoon, while he was out running errands, I searched the apartment. Not for anything specific, just something out of place. In the back of his closet, tucked into the pocket of a jacket he hadn't worn in years, I found a small folded piece of paper. It was a printed note, not handwritten. Same sentence as before. "I have to get used to this life soon." But underneath it, in smaller type, was another line. "Progress is being made." When he came home, I didn't mention it. That night, I dreamed of our apartment. Everything in it was the same, but the windows looked out onto a city I didn't recognize. He was there, smiling that perfect smile. And behind him stood another version of him, expressionless, watching me. I woke up to the sound of the shower running. He stepped out, towel over his shoulder, and for a split second, his smile faltered. Just a fraction. Then it was back, as perfect as ever. I don't know who I'm living with now, but I know it's not the same person who moved in with me 8 years ago, and I don't think the one I knew is coming back. The wrong time capsule. We buried the time capsule on the last day of senior year. It was supposed to be a small sentimental project. A metal box filled with pieces of our 18-year-old selves, locked away beneath the grass behind the football field. The school had chosen the spot, marked it with a plaque, and promised that at our 10-year reunion we'd dig it back up. I remember the heat of the afternoon, the sound of shovels biting into dirt, the easy laughter of people who thought they had all the time in the world. We put in the usual things: photographs, inside jokes written on folded paper, cheap souvenirs from class trips, a few items that would be embarrassing to see again but funny in a decade. I remember tucking in a letter to my future self. I remember zipping up a small photo album of my friends. We sealed the box with a cheer, dropped it into the hole, and walked away without thinking twice. 10 years passed faster than I expected. Jobs, moves, relationships, all the little turns that make you forget high school except in flashes. When the reunion invitation arrived, I almost didn't go. But the mention of time capsule ceremony in bold letters pulled me in. Nearly the whole class turned up that evening. The football field looked smaller than I remembered, the plaque behind the end zone weathered but still standing. A new principal, one I'd never met, gave a short speech about memories, then gestured to the maintenance worker beside him. The man knelt, pried up the plaque, and started digging. It didn't take long to reach the box. It came up covered in dirt, rust blooming at the seams. Someone handed over a wrench to loosen the bolts, and the lid groaned as it opened. I leaned forward, already bracing myself for the awkward nostalgia of bad handwriting and old inside jokes. Instead, the first thing out of the box was a glass jar. It was cloudy with age, the metal lid rusted at the edges. Inside were teeth, dozens of them, human by the look of it. No label, no explanation. The laughter died in my throat. A few people murmured, nervous laughs, questions about whether this was some prank. The next item was a torn piece of red fabric, frayed at the edges with dark stains mottling the weave. Someone suggested it might be part of a sports uniform, but our school colors had never been red. Then came the envelope. My name was on it. The handwriting was mine, exactly mine. But I had no memory of writing it. My stomach tightened as I slid the paper out. It was dated exactly 1 year after our graduation. The message was short. This is for after I'm gone. Don't let them bury me again. I looked up, waiting for someone to laugh and claim credit. No one did. My friends just stared at me, wide-eyed, swearing they didn't know what it meant. The rest of the items weren't any better. Scraps of Polaroids, showing only fragments of faces, a child's shoe, a length of knotted rope. No one recognized any of it. The principal suggested maybe the wrong capsule had been dug up, but the metal box had our school's name engraved on the lid, along with our graduation year. It was ours. Someone remembered that one of the teachers had filmed the burial. The video had supposedly been kept in the yearbook archive. After a few phone calls, a staff member came out with a dusty camcorder and an old TV on a rolling stand. We gathered close as the screen flickered to life. There we were, 10 years younger, sweaty and grinning, waving at the camera. One by one, we stepped forward to place our items into the capsule. But it wasn't the stuff I remembered. I watched myself, my teenage self, slide that same jar of teeth into the box. My best friend carefully folded the red cloth and set it inside. Another classmate tucked in the child's shoe. And then I saw myself again, this time holding the sealed envelope with my name on it. I smiled as I placed it down, a smile that was wider, brighter than I remembered ever smiling. Everyone looked the same way. Not just happy, ecstatic. Like putting those items in the box was the best thing that had ever happened to us. The video quality was perfect. Too perfect. Every face clear, every motion sharp. Even though I knew for a fact our school's cameras back then were awful. I remember the yearbook footage from that same day. It had been grainy, colors washed out, barely watchable. But this looked like it had been filmed yesterday. When the tape ended, no one spoke for a long moment. The maintenance worker quietly closed the lid on the box. The rest of the reunion felt off. People drifted away from the table where the capsule's contents sat, as if being near them was uncomfortable. By the end of the night, the jar of teeth was gone. So was my letter. No one saw who took them. Later, scrolling through photos on my phone, I found one I hadn't taken. It was of the capsule, open and full, from an angle I never stood at. In the background, a group of us were smiling at the camera. The me in that photo wasn't looking at the lens. I was looking at the box, and I was still smiling. The apartment above. It started as a nuisance. Soft thuds, above me in the middle of the night. I'd only been in the apartment a few months, and it was otherwise perfect. High ceilings, big windows, just enough street noise to remind me I wasn't alone in the world. The floors were old wood, so I wasn't surprised they carried sound. Still, by the third week of hearing footsteps at strange hours, I was getting irritated. At first, I blamed it on a new neighbor. Maybe someone who worked odd shifts, moving around at night without realizing how loud they were. But the noises weren't just footsteps. Sometimes it sounded like a chair scraping slowly across the floor. Other times, something heavy dropped, followed by a long pause, as if whoever was up there had stopped to listen for my reaction. After one especially restless night, I went to the building manager. I expected them to sigh, maybe promise to talk to the tenant upstairs. Instead, they looked puzzled. That unit's been empty for a year, they said. I thought they were joking. They weren't. They told me the previous tenant had left suddenly, left most of their furniture behind, and no one had rented it since. That night, the noises came again. This time, I sat up in bed, straining to pinpoint them. The chair scrape was unmistakable, slow, deliberate, like someone pushing it inch by inch. Then the footsteps began, moving back and forth. I told myself old buildings settle, pipes knock, sound bounces in strange ways. I needed proof. So I put my phone on the nightstand, recording. In the morning, I listened. The sounds were even clearer on playback. Chair legs dragging, deliberate steps, and then a voice. It said, "My name," drawn out, almost gentle, but in a tone that made my skin crawl. The next night, I set the phone to record again. Same thing. At exactly 1 a.m., the chair scrape, the pacing, and then my name, whispered like someone standing right over me. It became a pattern. Every night, 1 a.m. on the dot. By the end of the second week, I'd stopped sleeping before midnight, just waiting for it to start. I found myself glancing at the ceiling more often. That's when I noticed the stain. It was faint at first, just a pale patch in the plaster above my bed. But each day it seemed darker, larger. By the end of the week, the edges had deepened into a gray-brown outline, and it wasn't random. 2 darker spots sat where eyes might be. Below them, a curved smear like a mouth, half open. On either side, faint streaks extended outward, long, uneven, almost like arms. I told myself I was imagining it, that once you start looking for faces, you find them in clouds, in wood grain, in stains. That night, the noise came as usual. But this time, after the voice whispered my name, there was a new sound. A slow, steady tap, 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 directly above where the eyes in the stain were. The next day, I bought earplugs. They muffled the sounds, but the vibrations still reached me. The scrape, the pacing, the tapping. On the 4th week, I woke just before 1 a.m., heart already pounding. The room felt colder than usual. I pulled the blanket tighter and waited. When the clock on my phone hit 1 o'clock, the chair scraped above. Footsteps. The tap, tap, tap. Then the voice. Not just my name this time. "Look up." Against every instinct, I did. The stain was darker than I'd ever seen it. The eyes seemed deeper, almost recessed. For a moment, I thought I saw movement. A ripple, like breath, passing through fabric. The next morning, I went back to the manager and demanded to see the empty unit. They hesitated, then agreed. The apartment above was cold, the air stale. Dust coated every surface. The furniture was still there, an old wooden table, a chair with one leg slightly shorter than the others. I walked to where my bedroom would be below, and saw the chair positioned directly above where my bed sat. The legs of the chair had worn grooves into the floorboards from being dragged back and forth. On the table was a scrap of paper. In neat, careful handwriting, it said, "One more night." I left without touching anything. That night, I didn't go to bed. I sat in the living room, lights on, trying to pretend I couldn't feel the weight of the hour approaching. At exactly 1 a.m., from the bedroom, the chair scraped. And even though I hadn't stepped foot in there all night, I heard the floor above me creak. Like someone had climbed down and was now standing in my room,